Hello, and a very warm welcome to episode 13 of Education Forward. I am your host, Socheta, and I am feeling particularly inspired today as we settle into our studio chairs to discuss a topic that sits at the very heart of meaningful education. Today, we are diving deep into culturally responsive teaching practices.
It is such a pleasure to be here, Socheta. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I can feel the energy in the room already, and I think it is just the right vibe for a conversation that is, quite frankly, long overdue in many of our educational spaces.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Sarwin. For those listening who might be new to the term, or perhaps have heard it used as a buzzword but haven't really felt its impact, how would you define culturally responsive teaching from your perspective as an educator who has spent years in the trenches?
You know, if I had to strip away all the academic jargon, I would say it is the practice of seeing, truly seeing. It is about recognizing that every child walks through those classroom doors carrying an invisible backpack filled with their heritage, their language, their family's stories, and their unique worldview. It isn't just a teaching method. It is a way of being that honors those identities as assets rather than obstacles.
That is a powerful image, an invisible backpack. I think many of us can look back on our own school days and remember times when we felt we had to leave that backpack at the door just to fit in. Does it ever break your heart a little when you see students trying to hide who they are?
Oh, Socheta, more than a little. It aches. When a student feels they have to mute their culture to succeed, we aren't just losing their perspective. We are losing a part of their soul in the learning process. I remember a student early in my career. Let's call him Sam. He was so quiet, almost invisible. It wasn't until I brought in stories that reflected his community's history that his eyes finally lit up. He realized for the first time that his story belonged in a book.
That light you mentioned is exactly what we are chasing, isn't it? It's that spark of connection. But I want to get real for a second. Some teachers might hear this and think, I have 30 students from 10 different backgrounds. How can I possibly be responsive to all of them without feeling overwhelmed? What would you say to that feeling of hesitation?
It's a valid fear. I felt it too. But here is the secret. You don't have to be an expert in every single culture. That's impossible. What you need is cultural humility. It is about being a co-learner with your students. It is about saying, I don't know everything about your world, but I am deeply curious, and I respect it enough to make space for it. It turns the classroom from a hierarchy into a community.
I love that shift in perspective, moving from expert to co-learner. It takes the pressure off, but it also places a beautiful responsibility on the teacher to be vulnerable. Can you talk about one specific strategy, maybe something a teacher could try tomorrow that goes beyond just food, folks, and fun? You know, the surface level stuff.
Exactly. We have to move past the Taco Tuesday version of culture. One of the most effective strategies is what I call cognitive scaffolding through cultural connection. If I'm teaching a complex math concept or a literary device, I look for metaphors that exist within the students' lived experiences. If I have students from an agrarian background, I might use the logic of irrigation or planting cycles to explain a process. It is about using what they already know as a bridge to what they are learning. It makes the abstract feel concrete and respectful.
That is brilliant. It's like you're validating their brain's natural way of processing information. I can imagine how much more confident a student feels when the teacher uses a metaphor that resonates with their home life. It says, the way your family thinks is smart and useful here.
Precisely. And that leads to the 3 pillars of CRT: high expectations, cultural competence, and socio-political consciousness. We can't just be nice to students. We have to hold them to the highest standards because we believe in their brilliance. Anything less is what we call the poverty of expectations.
The poverty of expectations. That phrase carries so much weight. It suggests that by not challenging our students, we are actually failing them. How do you balance that high-bar academic rigor with the emotional sensitivity required for cultural responsiveness?
It starts with trust. A student will climb a mountain for you if they know they believe they can reach the top, and they won't let them fall. In a culturally responsive classroom, that trust is built through those small daily affirmations. When you learn to pronounce their names correctly, when you ask about their weekend in a way that shows you remember their family's traditions, that is the foundation. Once that trust is solid, you can push them harder than they ever thought possible.
With a warm smile, I can feel the love you have for your students in every word you say, Mr. Sarwin. It makes me wish I was back in the classroom. But we also have to talk about this socio-political consciousness piece. That can be the scariest part for educators. How do we help students look at the world critically without it feeling, I don't know, too heavy or controversial?
It is heavy, Socheta, but the world is heavy for our students every day. If we ignore the inequities they see in their neighborhoods or on the news, we are telling them that school isn't the place for the real world. We empower them when we give them the tools to analyze those problems. We aren't telling them what to think. We are teaching them how to ask why and how can we make this better. It turns them from passive recipients of information into active citizens.
Deeply moved. It gives them agency. It gives them a voice. I am sitting here thinking about the teachers listening right now who might be in a district where this feels difficult or unsupported. Do you have a word of encouragement for the lone teacher trying to make a difference?
With a gentle, encouraging tone, to that teacher, I say, your classroom is a sanctuary. Even if the world outside or the system around you feels rigid, within those four walls, you create the weather. You can be the one person who makes a child feel that their whole self is welcome. It is a quiet revolution, one student at a time, and it is the most important work there is. Do not lose heart. The seeds you are planting might not bloom this semester, but they will bloom.
With a slight tremor of emotion. You create the weather. I am going to be thinking about that all week. Thank you, Mr. Sarwin, for sharing your heart and your wisdom with us today. This has been such a nourishing conversation.
It has been my absolute joy, Socheta. Thank you for holding this space for such an important dialogue. I hope our listeners feel a little more empowered today.
I know I do. And to all of you listening at home, in your cars, or during your prep period, thank you for the work you do. Remember, your culture, your story, and your student stories are your greatest strengths. This has been episode 13 of Education Forward. We'll see you next time.